Well, actually, we had to reschedule this one because there was a lot of work in the Nerdrotic sphere. But we're back here to talk to Mark, Victor, but I just lost my place. I'm such a pro at this.
I can help you out here. When you say we're back, I refer to Poltergeist. So the phrase we're back is.
Yes. God, I love that movie so much. I love both of them so much. And I'm happy to have you here. So I will start with what I was supposed to read. Hello and welcome to Paranormal X, your portal to the unknown. I'm your host, Gary Buechler, also known as Nerdrotic. You might have heard of me, maybe not. I spent a decade running a comic book store in San Francisco and have long been a commentator on all things pop culture, the good, the bad, the ugly, especially the geeky and the supernatural, which is something we've recently gone into with Forbidden Frontier. From comics to cosmic anomalies, we cover it all here. So whether you're here to explore ghost stories, unravel UFO sightings, or dive into the depths of the unexplained phenomenon, you come to the right place. Let's start on today's journey into the paranormal. And don't forget this is dual streaming on ParanormalX. So don't forget to subscribe over there. I think we're on Facebook too. What's up, Facebook? I haven't been on Facebook in a long time. Today on Paranormal X, we're thrilled to have founder Mark Victor join us. Mark, nice to see you again.
I'm happy to be here. Nice to see you. We go way back already.
Way back. We're old friends now. Mark is are you a seasoned screenwriter? You look seasoned, but that's not an insult.
Okay. Well, it's sure it is. No, well seasoned. You know, I like, you could say, veteran. I have scars. I need medical attention from doing it.
Is that from being a producer or a screenwriter or both?
Both, but I think you're definitely punished more as a screenwriter.
Yes.
You're asked to write, rewrite. God knows who's giving you the notes and why. It's sort of a endless commentary of your work keeps happening.
Have you ever, just for fun, noted yourself when you were a producer and a screenwriter on something?
Noted myself?
Yeah. Put notes on your own script.
Sure.
Just to go through the folly.
Well, the truth is I like getting notes in general because they spark ideas. What I really don't enjoy are you get notes, and a lot of times in this pipeline of people who work at studios, there's a lot of people who want their one idea in the screenplay, and then it vanishes, or they fight for it, and sometimes it doesn't make much sense.
Well, yeah, that's, I think, one of the problems with like writing today is there's just so much committee. And that's been admitted by screenwriters who've talked to me behind the scenes, and it seems like more things are just produced now than actually created and written. I think that's one of the biggest problems.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
No, it's going to give you a sideways tidbit of that. Is that I'm writing a script about something, and the executive says, I'd really like to have a scene that has chocolate in it.
Why?
I didn't understand. It had nothing to do with the character or the plot. Well, who knows? Who knows?
Algorithm.
Yes.
I was marveling, and I'd have mentioned this before, at the amount of credits at the end of Poltergeist. It's a couple minutes. It's not 20 minutes of credits.
I think a lot of that has to do because it was a special effects movie. And so there's, a whole nother layer of everything doing the special effects. Actually, the movies received a fair amount of their Academy Award nominations for effects and sound and so forth. So you do the best you can and try and get people's names out there.
Right. So Paranormal X is the hub for experiencer stories, paranormal news, fiction, scripts, entertainment, and really anything that explores the unexplainable, which I love. I love the unexplainable. So some of you may know Mark Victor. He wrote Poltergeist and Poltergeist 2, two movies that we've mentioned before. And though I'm sorry to repeat this, but hugely influential in my life. That particularly that movie, because that was early in the days when Spielberg's name was, I mean, it's still gold, but it was absolute gold, and his name being on something just automatically made you go. Remember the days of people going to the theaters for a name, for a creative person, and not just a character, and being blown away at like 12 years old watching this PG movie that probably wouldn't even be PG today. And prior to PG-13, Mark, the old PG-13. And it really, what that movie captured, Mark, was the neighborhood I lived in, like my world.
I would say it was the first suburban ghost story. Before that, they were all, Gothic. You were afraid of the buildings themselves. But this set it in the suburbs with a suburban family. It had a lot of firsts, oddly enough. I think it's the first time you saw a family smoking pot on the screen and laughing about it. There were a lot of little tidbits like that at the time, it's ordinary now, but seemed innovative and fun.
Yeah, it was new for us, but like it was that and E.T. They both took place in like these suburban neighborhoods that were still being built, and in the in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, where I grew up and my generation grew up. That's pretty much the world we lived in, little pockets of suburbs. And yes, there were graveyards being being moved for these suburbs. So that sorry, my audio was low. That's fixed now on my side. Sorry, that was on my side. So that stuff was happening. That we in our neighborhood, we had some Adobe what ruins basically that they just mowed over for an apartment complex, which was so sad. I remember playing around those things. They weren't fenced off, and then they just crushed them for an apartment complex. Not a graveyard, but maybe.
Yeah. Commerce is a powerful motivator.
Yep. Yeah. So you got a Kickstarter. You're doing a comic book. It's based on a novel called Time of Death. So what led you to doing this?
Boy, everything's a long story and saga. By the way, you did a great interview with Josh Anderson, the guy. He wrote the original novel. They were a series of 6 books. And, it all seems like it happens fast, but from my end of the world, I sit around reading stuff all the time, thinking, and I read this because a friend of mine was involved in the publishing of it. And I thought, boy, this is fun. It's a story about time travel and personal redemption and jeopardy. And it has a lot of elements that I think I enjoy and most people enjoy. If you think about all the time travel movies and how many have been successful and fascinate us, Back to the Future, Terminator, etc. It's fun when you find one that works and is refreshing.
Yes. That's not a subject I ever get tired of as long as it's done right.
I was going to say, just if you don't mind.
Not at all.
You have a prestigious guest later with Dr. Mossbridge. And I think about how far we've come that you have intellectuals, scholars, etc., who now study noetics, time travel, dimensions. This is, part of curriculums. And if I think back, let's say, the long journey, I remember when they'd say, well, you can't go faster than the speed of sound. Then than they could. They could speed of sound, then it's the speed of light. Now they talk about bending light and gravity and being able to do dimensions. It's all pretty fascinating what's acceptable now. And in the interviews and stuff you do, I think it's the same thing with what I call non-ordinary reality, which I think of as, okay, a lot of stuff is real. A lot of it is our brains are limited, our senses are limited, and there's so much going on beyond that that we're trying to tap into and don't know about. That our world and what's possible just keeps expanding.
Yeah, as you know, this was all science fiction when I was younger, and it's strange to see it happen, and it's great. Yes. Now it's just this well, I won't say accepted, but it's at least talked about, multiple dimensions that you were talking about. But it makes for great inspirations for stories I've talked about in the past on my channel. X-Files pretty much just listened to Art Bell every night and wrote a script, and it worked. Yeah. It was great. Now you can actually do this with some science, getting a little fuzzy with the science, but like the theory of it, at least. And you're doing that with this comic. You have your protagonist gets into a little bit of trouble, makes a very bad decision, and ends up in prison, but is given an offer to possibly change things.
And that's listen, what we try and do, and we're also doing this on a website, ParanormalX, is I want to bring just entertainment and information. And we're trying to, we're starting out trying to build a community where people can talk about this, but also be entertained by it as well. And so I'm with you. This is all fascinating to me. I remember when I started out, I was asked by a network to do a show, and I chose. They sort of wanted me to do it. I did a show on alien abductions, and I really didn't know anything about it, and did research and did the three most credible shows I could find. And afterwards, I received a lot of people started contacting myself and our company, because no one had ever done it seriously, not mocking the people. And we just did it straightforward. And once you start hearing stories and reading about it, some of the strangest things sure have a lot of credible people around it. And it's pretty fascinating. And back then, if you brought that up out loud, you were thought of as crazy. And today, when people talk about, are there non-earthly life forms out there, or are they visiting? I would say probably over half the population is on board with that.
Yeah, we've had, Gary Nolan openly talk about, I was just watching a video the other day, and they asked him, what's the percentage of aliens visiting and being here? He said 100%. That's a prestigious professor from, and that we also have Congress openly talking about, I think the new one is, I hate the term UAP, by the way. I hate it. I call it UFO.
It's a trick.
It's a trick. It's a trick. But they're really pushing they're not aliens from space. They're interdimensional, which I'm completely open to. It would make a lot of sense when a lot of the sightings seem to be of things that aren't really solid, right? But it's good that this is in the ether now, and it's being openly talked about. And sure, there's some stuff that's crazy, but I love that you guys have a site, because I've been begging for this, something centralized, right, where we can go to have a little fun, because it gets a little dry sometimes. have a little fun, and then try to get to the truth of it. Not accept everything, but be open to every idea. Right? That's what we try to do on Forbidden Frontier. Not well, but
yeah. I'm with you. I just think it's all fascinating. It's interesting, and why not? As I said earlier, a dog hears better than I do. There's we're so limited in our range and our brains, but it's so much fun. Humans keep exploring, and so that's part of our journey.
It is. So back to your book real quick, which I read the first issue of. The art is really good, and I found the story compelling. I wanted to know what happened next. Is there anything you want to tease about our character Kyle, or do you even want to give a little background again?
Well, I think you stated the premise. The fun is when you have to go back.
We have a phone going. Okay, sorry. Not me.
Yeah, it came over my computer.
For once. So, it's all good.
I'm not smart enough to control that. With the idea of time travel and having to go back, there's a lot of fun always in the rules, because all time travel stories have rules, and they seem to always get violated in some manner, and then very bad things can happen. In our case, our sort of whiz kid going to college who screws up is in prison, and he's told he's supposed to go all the way back and meet his father, who he's estranged from, before his father ever met his mother, and convince him of things he has to do to help him prevent this accident. And of course, can you imagine someone telling you you're supposed to do that? So it starts out right away. Everything is a difficult and close to impossible journey, and it's a real ride. And there's a whole other worlds going on. People are able to create sort of this silk ink blot that helps you time travel. And of course, you can only stay for a limited amount of time, and you can't ever see your previous self simultaneously when you're back there. So there's a lot of those fun elements.
Yeah, it does. The setup was good because you didn't waste any time getting to the bad decision, and then when Dad comes in, there's something interesting to their relationship that really makes the scene even better. So a lot of conflict. A lot of good conflict there, and that's what I like. That's what I like.
Right. Credit to Josh, who wrote the book. Then we try and take material and enhance it, and we wound up with Felipe. We've got some terrific artists for the comic book. I've never done one before, so this is, a process that I'm learning about. I've never done a Kickstarter before, but we're trying to create a entertainment community exchange of information, and this project, it's our initial stepping stone.
That's good. Yeah, Kickstarter's been around for a while. There's other places. There's Indiegogo too, and I've seen lots of successes there, and I love like the fact that the gatekeepers have fallen, and you can just go out and do your own thing and be in complete control. And while I'm sure you'd love to make billions.
Well, it takes us back to the beginning of our conversation. You got this piece of material, instead of waiting for 5 meetings at studios where their priorities are bestsellers and having to service stars, on the set in order to get your project going. You can have fun with it in today's world yourself and get the content out there in a variety of different ways.
Yep. And you're in control. Like you said, you're in control. You're in control of the story. And again, the ceiling might not be as high, but it creative freedom you can't put a price on. You just can't.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That's true for sure. Was Jaws a comic book? I'm joking.
No. But I'm sure they're going to make a prequel any day now. So
exactly. There's it does get a little tiring with all the sequels, so it's fun to see something fresh.
It is. So I see you in the private chat. I'll fix that problem in just a second. But thanks, Mark. So we've got.
I have one question for you, Gary.
Yes.
The premise always on time travel, it's like winning the lottery. I want to know if you could go back in time and change one thing, if we were all given that, what would it be?
Oh, man. I'm going to give a boring answer. Sorry. Nothing.
Let's hear it. Nothing?
Absolutely nothing. Because I would be afraid it would change where my life is now. And I've been through some crazy stuff. We all have in our past, but I learned from it, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Well, that's part of your journey, I guess. Because I'm talking to you, I'd probably change the outcome of the 1984 pennant game against the Padres, and that the Cubs would win, and that the world would be a better place.
You would have lost to the Tigers too, okay? The Tigers were just unbeatable at that time. You had a pretty good team, though. No. Okay, well, maybe have the San Diego Chargers win a Super Bowl.
There you go. Now you're focused.
Maybe they have them win a Super Bowl.
Well, I think we could get to Dr. Mossbridge. I'm sure has smarter things to say than I do on this.
And me too. Don't worry. Thank you, Mark. And don't forget to, go to the Kickstarter. The link will be posted in the chat, on my chat immediately. It takes me a second. Sorry. And then go to ParanormalX. It's all linked in the description, by the way. You can all find it in the description and go right there. I don't know if Eric K, my mod, is here. He might be able to post it too, but he might not be here. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Gary. Pleasure talking with you.
Pleasure talking with you. Talk to you again soon. All right. Now we have a doctor. Let me... So
it was so cool listening to. I mean, I can't believe I just got to hear from the writer of Poltergeist. That is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Love that movie.
Feels like, why don't we just talk about that?
Yeah,
it's so cool. So anyway, it's his comic strip. That's like his comic book that's happening. Is that right?
Yeah. So yeah. They're doing a comic book called Weed Inc. And I guess I can read this here. We're going to get into this today. The core plot of Weed Inc. in quantum physics hinges on the idea of time travel. As such, to explore the ideas of the comic and time travel in general, we brought on a very special guest, Dr. Julia Mossbridge, to enlighten us on the time travel theory. Now, Dr. Mossbridge, thank you for being here. I've got an intro to read. You've done some stuff.
I've done some stuff, but I just want to say 3 more days on the Kickstarter.
Yes, 3 more days on the Kickstarter. And we're going to shout it out on Real BBC, which is my comic book show, which will be on at Heel versus Babyface channel tomorrow at noon. We're going to shout that out too. We'll also have comic writer Chuck Dixon and comic artist Graham Nolan, co-creators of Bane, the Batman villain Bane. Okay, so Dr. Mossbridge is the acting CEO of Lightroot Quantum. Please correct me if I screw anything up, Dr. Mossbridge, please.
So far, so good. Yes.
The co-founder and board chair of the nonprofit TILT, the Institute of Love and Time, an affiliate professor in physics and biophysics at University of San Diego, my hometown of San Diego, and research director, Mossbridge Institute, LLC. Her focus is on teaching and learning about love and time in perception and artificial intelligence. And she pursues this focus by speaking about love and time, leading projects, conducting research, and advising technology executives and engineers, as well as the federal government. If we could teach AI common sense as well, that would be awesome. Julia received her PhD in communication sciences and disorders from Northwestern University, her MA in neuroscience from the University of California at San Francisco. I lived there for 18 years. And she received her BA with highest honors in neuroscience from Oberlin College. You went to a lot of school. She also invented and patented Choice Compass as the author of The Calling, as well as the co-author of the Transcended Mind, Rethinking the Science of Consciousness, and the Premonition Code. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mossbridge.
Hi, that was a long bio. Thank you for reading it all. And you can just call me Julia, too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. You could call me Gary. It's all right. Or
Okay.
Gum. Either one is fine. Like Mark said, I will answer to absolutely everything. So I guess the first question, again, because we're going to be discussing time travel. I love consciousness new because I think they're definitely intertwined. Dr. Mossbridge, could you explain how reverse causality works and how it might apply to human experiences like precognition and remote viewing?
I can't explain how reverse causality works because no one knows, at least to my knowledge. I think there's different ideas about it, but I can explain what it is. I can explain.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
explain what the phenomenon is. It's a super interesting question how it works, and there's many competing theories. So we normally think about time, right, as linear, going in one direction. Probably most people who are listening to this podcast have learned that that's kind of a shitty way to think about time in terms of its accuracy. Like, it's not very accurate, but it is the way we perceive it for the most part, except for those of us who have sort of out of order experiences, which turns out to be a lot of people. But let's imagine that we're all perceiving time in this linear fashion that goes in only one direction. Let's imagine that, even though it's not totally true. We're certainly taught that cause precedes effect. So reverse causality just means that, and it's instead what we would call the effect is actually the cause. And so it's like, I'm going to use an example that a lot of physics teachers who are teaching about the second law of thermodynamics might use. If I drop a coffee cup and it shatters to a bunch of pieces on the ground, I say, well, the cause of the shattering was I dropped the coffee cup. So clearly the cause came before the effect. So reverse causality is saying that there's an argument that the reason that you dropped the coffee cup was because it was shattered on the ground. So it plays a little loosey-goosey with our usual sense of the way things work. And that's the point. And you could actually do experiments both in psychology and in physics and in physiology to show that this is going on at multiple levels in all natural systems, not just at the quantum level, although the quantum level is getting more and more ill-defined as we see that quantum mechanics ends up applying at larger and larger scales. So we used to pretend that there was a quantum level and there was like a wall between these small particles and everything else, and now we're sort of seeing that isn't really the case, of course. So anyway, it seems to apply at all levels, that there's this retrocausal component to the way things work. It's just a natural part of the way the universe works. We don't totally understand it. The key thing we don't understand is the relationship between that physical reality of both forward and retrocausality happening, that physical reality, and what we perceive. That's really what we don't understand. Because once you start asking the question, well, why don't we perceive it that way? Why do we only perceive in one direction? You're getting to the thing that we really don't understand. The physics of time symmetry is written into most physical equations. They're mostly time reversible. So it's really not the physics so much as the why do we perceive things this way? So it ends up being a consciousness question, kind of. So it's very interesting, this interplay between the physics of time and the perception of time. And that's really kind of the story that the next decade, I think, is going to tell about time travel, about informational time travel. We could talk about the difference between the kind of time travel that Mark is writing about in his comic book and informational time travel, which I think is going to be more proximal or next. So anyway, sorry, I got launched.
No, that's great. I love the concept of informational time travel because I think that's like the one, at least just a complete layman, that I could buy the most. Like that we could somehow send a message, for the bad example, forward or backwards. And you were talking, again, you're the physicist, I'm not. There's certain things.
Not a physicist.
Doctor. Doctor. I'm a dummy. I've been kicked out of 3 high schools. True story. But
that's awesome.
But like certain things behaving differently when they're observed, right? So like there's science behind that, and that's just weird. That's just beyond weird. And you're right. We as humans, we there's the Big Bang Theory, which is starting to get questioned a little bit. It's just because we have this concept of a beginning and end. We need something to have a beginning and end as humans, because that's what our lifespan is, and that's how we perceive it. But things don't. That's not how it works in the universe, right? It breaks down. It becomes other things. And why
maybe.
wouldn't?
I mean, we kind of don't know, but maybe. Yeah.
Why wouldn't our consciousness do that?
Yeah.
In your research, you explore different models of time in science and physics. Can you share some of the models and how they might affect our understanding of time travel?
Yeah. So let's talk about the 3 different kinds of time travel. So there's an article, I maybe sent you the link, maybe we can put this in the show notes. It's called How to Avoid the Time Wars. It's about the different kinds of time travel and the research people are doing, including myself, on these different kinds of time travel. So let's just quickly go down them. So there's mental time travel. So people who are, like when you have a memory, that's mental time travel, right? So basically you're using your mind to put yourself in a different place in time. Also precognition, so people who can have dreams or visions or experiences of what the future might hold. You can do experiments. I've done about 15 to 20 years of experiments now on people like that, and actually people in general who have this skill. It turns out it's a general human trait, like other human traits, that is distributed in the population in sort of the same way musical talent is. So anyway, people who can actually predict future events that shouldn't be predictable, like things that are selected by a random number generator, those are called precogs. And so precognition is another form of mental time travel. So then there's informational time travel, which is sending, like you had just said, Gary, sending information backwards in time. Primarily, we don't talk about forward in time because that's like writing a book and now you're sending it forward in time, because that's not really considered time travel because it's the forward direction. Like I shouldn't have used memory as an example for mental time travel. But anyway, informational time travel would be like you get a letter from your future self and it says, it's so great that you move to this place, but don't forget to talk to so-and-so who will be key to your future. And that's why you talk to that person. And so it's like this, it develops this loop, which I don't worry about at all. And then there's physical time travel, which is the stuff that is usually in science fiction stories, just like this this ink, weed, and whatever, I forget the title of it. But anyway, the one we were just talking
Weed
about.
Ink. Weed Ink and quantum physics.
And quantum physics. Yeah, and so the physical time travel is when you take the whole body and interestingly the person's memories and consciousness, and you transplant them in time, usually in the reverse direction, sometimes in the forward direction if it leaps over the linear time. So those are the 3 kinds of time travel that I think are important to differentiate when we talk about. And now I forget the original question.
I think it was just providing some models for what might affect our understanding of it. Yeah.
So I think about informational time travel because I think I think about both mental time travel because I've studied it, and informational time travel because I'm also studying that in the world of optics using light. And so I think about those the most. I think they're the most tractable right now for humanity. I do think eventually we'll get to physical time travel, and I think we do, and I think UFOs are evidence of that, most likely. But we could come back to that if you want to talk abductions and time travel and UFOs. I sort of think that's interesting, but that's a big speculation. But I know from research and empirical data that I have produced and from other people that we can do mental time travel and we can do informational time travel. And so then that motivates me because I'm an empiricist, so I like to do experiments. Seeing the result motivates me to figure out how it's going on. So I actually didn't start thinking about the mechanism until I was very clear that these things were happening. So in terms of the mechanism for both mental and informational time travel, because if you think of it, they're kind of related. Like if you're receiving a message from the future, that could be in your mind. So that's kind of like a cross between mental and informational time travel, right? So the question becomes, how does information travel backwards in time, in what we call time in our forward conception? And so there's two models that I've developed. I felt compelled to develop two different models because the data look like there's two different kinds of things going on. So there's a paper I have out there that if you Google, it's called Precognition at the Boundaries. Maybe they can put the link up. If you go to Google Scholar and type in Precognition at the Boundaries and my name, it'll come up. But this is like a review of these two different models. So one model is just simple, and most physicists will agree begrudgingly that this is a decent model for kind of local informational time travel. So basically information can potentially move backward and forward along your timeline of your life. So, your world line, as they call it in physics, the moment from when you're born, you go all over the place, and then you die. And that's your world line as a person, right? So the idea that information could move back and forth within your brain or within that world line is like a simple model. It should be time symmetric. In fact, when people make these things in physics called light cones that look like this, they're really sort of secretly time symmetric, even though we only talk about one direction at a time. So that information should be time symmetric. As long as you're staying within the light cone, which is bounded by the speed of light, it really should be okay. So I'm in my world line, I'm in my light cone. That's one model. That's fine. Another model, because there's actual look, you put search precognition at the boundaries on Google Scholar and the little running thing. That's
she's
really
good.
Nice. Thank
she's
you.
Good.
She's very good. Another model is outside the light cone. So basically, instead of what I call slogging through space-time, which is what we normally have to do in our lives, we slog through space-time, and rocket ships, we imagine slogging through space-time. Outside of the sort of local space-time, outside of this light cone, I think that there can be sort of multidimensional or like intentional multidimensional impacts on our knowledge base. So like there's a way in which, and this gets really kind of into the freaky stuff, but that's because I also study experimental psychology, but there's a way in which intention can come from the universe, not just from another conscious being. So it's like, if you want to talk about God, you could call it that, but like a multi-dimensional, outside of our local space-time intention to give you information. And so the evidence for this is based on that sometimes people can predict future events that have been selected by a random number generator that they will never experience. And this has been true, like the intelligence community back in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s in the US investigated this capacity. And the people who were doing, the Stargate program, I'm sure you've talked about and know about, but the people who were doing that work, for the most part, a lot of it was precognitive, and they were never given feedback in their lifetimes about what the actual thing was, because it might have been classified or beyond their need to know. So, and then present day experiments support this, people who are not given feedback, but who have the capacity to do this. So that means there has to be another model, because it's not in your world line. Somehow there's like an intentionality that's giving you this information, not because your future self is telling you, but because the kind of universe or the Akashic records or whatever
Yep.
the heck is the deal, like the information, I like to think of it in informational substrate, or I've called it pervasive universal consciousness, or PUC. It's giving you the information and you don't know why, and it's not in your need to know why. Right? Like the universe has got some situation going on and it's giving you the information, and that's that. So that's the other model. I mean, so these models are very vague, right?
They are, but it's something we've all had that gut feeling, right?
Yeah.
But and I've had it a couple times before something really bad happened that I should have listened to and didn't. But
Yeah.
and there is, I wanted to bring up, I mean, it's not super connected to this, but quantum entanglement. I had to look it up because I completely forgot, but quantum entanglement is the phenomenon that allows two subatomic particles to remain connected even when separated by like vast distances, and we're talking vast distances. That these two they'll be connected. That there has to be something to that. Like if they, I mean, again, I don't know if that's just purely a theory right now.
No, it's been tested. It's absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, in fact, the folks who won the Nobel Prize, was it last year in physics or the year before? I forget. But are famous for saying like, look, this is real and our universe is non-local. And that's the situation. And they finally got acknowledged for it.
That's crazy.
Things are changing in the
Yeah.
world of physics where people are saying, guess what? This non-locality stuff is real.
That might change everything, which
Just a little bit.
little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. But we should talk. We should get to the redemption piece actually, because I'm super. I don't know if you're open to that, but like I think I'm desperate to talk about this whole idea of informational time travel and redemption.
Oh, absolutely. Hang on, let me read ahead. Let me make sure.
Sorry, did I skip?
No, it's me. I should be paying attention. Okay, this is it. Your work on cognitive abilities suggests that humans might have the ability to sense future events. That happened to me once, and that was what I was just talking about. And I didn't listen. Excuse me. And I ended up going to prison for a couple of years. Back in my distant past. I'm a grateful recovering addict now, but that's a story for another day. How might
I so want to hear that story.
How might these abilities be scientifically explained, and do you think they could be harnessed or controlled? And are there ways that this relates to how a person like Kyle Cash in the comics might attempt to undo his past mistakes in the comic, which are pretty bad?
The mistakes? Yeah. So everyone makes mistakes, and some are worse than others, right? Some are more consequential than others. Yeah. So, okay. So once I start thinking of an answer to a question, I usually forget the question. So if I fail to answer the question,
it's all right. Basically, will he be able to undo his past mistakes? I mean, that's
right. That's right. Good. This was kind of an answer to the question. Okay. So we normally so most people, when they're thinking about timelines, it's like the Back to the Future story, right?
Yep.
So if I go back, then there's this timeline where that worked. Oh, but wait, then this worked. So now we have a different timeline, etc. But I think actually Back to the Future itself was not talking about timelines. It was talking about one reality, one universe that you could change. And you would change the whole universe like that. It's not like you entered in a different universe. Everything would be different. And if you experience that change, then you would have the memory of the other way, but no one else would. Another sort of work of fiction that talks about that same idea, except some people have a memory of the change, is the book Recursion by Blake Crouch. Which is a different spin. So thinking about what you have a memory of, what is your conscious experience of, is really the key to this whole stuff. It's not really the physics, because the physics, you could tell whatever story you want. It's how the human consciousness interacts with the physics. And so the way I think it works, I'm not partial. And this is, by the way, I know that when I say this, it sounds like I have some authority because I'm a scientist who studies this stuff. But what I'm about to say is purely aesthetic. In other words, this is based on my own sort of sense of how things work. That's just intuitive. It is not based on being able to rule out other options or knowing the physics that's going to say, no, that's wrong, right? That's not my training's in cognitive neuroscience, and I only recently started doing anything in the world of physics. So know that I don't speak with authority, except that I can tell you this is my opinion based on my intuition. That's it. Okay. Having said that, I don't think this multiple universe story is correct. I think people have told that story from the world of physics because they don't want retrocausality to be correct. But in fact, they're solving the same problem in quantum mechanics with multiple universes or multiple worlds than that you would solve with retrocausality, and retrocausality is actually simpler. And if you want to read more about that, I suggest reading Hugh Price, Huwprice, and Ken Wharton, Kenwharton, their work on Bell's paradox and retrocausality is really beautiful. So anyway, so let's assume that we have a single universe. Now, can you change the past? That the verb is really important because of human perception. It won't feel like a change. It'll feel like whatever happened all along, and you may not have the memory of the change. But yes, you can influence. I prefer the word influence because change suggests there's a timeline that happened, and now you're going to go back and you're going to make it a different thing. Influence suggested the whole time the situation was you were going to go back and make that happen, and you still have to do it. So I had a dream. This is going to all relate. I had a dream after my husband had true story, my husband had a double lung transplant in 2013. He's survived. He's in the other room. He's doing great.
Good.
But at the time, he was a dead man. I mean, there's no one who saw him thought he was going to live another day. So super miracle. After he had the transplant, I had this dream, probably because of what I study and also the emotional, status of the transplant in my mind. I had this dream that I was talking to the transplant doctors, and they said, well, he's fine. So we don't have to do the transplant, right? Because he's just fine. Like, clearly he's alive. He's doing great. He's a couple years out. And I said to them, no, he's fine because you did the transplant. You have to do the transplant. And it was a really powerful dream for me because people say all the time, like, well, should I use my mental time travel? So I work with this organization that I co-founded called TILT, the Institute for Love and Time. And it's about using mental time travel and unconditional love to mend, I like the term mend, or to influence the past, to basically help deal with trauma or help deal with difficulties in the past. And then you have a new timeline, except the other timeline doesn't exist anymore. Like, so now you have the experience that is amended. And this is a key healing piece for humanity that is being discussed in this comic book, which makes me excited. And it comes from my own experience as a kid. I had a very eccentric, brilliant family. We lived in this farmhouse away from anyone else. I had like the friends of the people who rented out the chicken coop area, which my grandparents had built up into a place to rent out. But I lived with my grandparents, so it was all very rough. And every night there was this trigger warning. Every night there was this ritual abuse, and for about 10 years. And I got through it because this woman sat in this chair next to the bed. In my mind's eye, it was not a hallucination. I knew that it was not a physical woman. But she would say to me, I know that you're mad right now, and it makes sense that you're mad, and it's not right. And in the future, you're going to thrive, and I'm telling you. And just over and over again, she would just say, like, it's okay to be angry. It makes sense. This is not right. Just totally reaffirming. And so when I was in therapy in my 40s or late 30s, early 40s, and my therapist had me go back and sit with myself when I was like 7, 8, 9, etc., and do this, I was like, oh, that woman was me. And then I couldn't remember if that actually happened in my childhood memory or not, or if I had, like, the memory shifted. So now I have this experience of that having happened, and I don't care if it happened, if I had that memory or not when I was before the time I saw the therapist. It doesn't matter because it's shifted, and now I have this like healing that happened. And so what we do at TILT, the Institute for Love and Time, is because I build technology and do science, I created technology to help people do that in their own lives and then tested it. And it turns out it's really valuable. People really develop, it's now called balanced time perspective. A lot of people are talking about this, and we weren't the first ones. We were just the first ones to create a technology to help it. But it turns out that having a time perspective where you kind of feel like I have a relationship with my past self and I can actually help my past self out, and my future self can give me wisdom, and that's all, sure, it's all in my head, but in a certain sense it's kind of real. Like what's in our head really impacts our lives. So I feel like that leads to this idea of time travel as redemption. This is mental time travel, and it's totally, you know, quote, in your head, but your head is a big place that affects everything and potentially affects physical reality. If you read Blake Crouch's Recursion. So yeah, that's my thought.
That's good. You answered like 2 questions at once, by the way. That was great. And as a grateful recovering addict, one of the things just on the real level is we you know, I've had sponsees and my sponsors. We've talked a lot about abuse, and the hardest thing to do is to forgive your abuser, right? But you have to do it if you're going to move on. You just can't. Otherwise, that abuser wins every day. Doesn't make that abuser like they belong in jail. They deserve the punishment they get, whatever. But for that person to heal and move on, and you know, alcohol and drugs are just the symptom, by the way, to behavioral problems from either abuse or birth. It's an important thing to do. It really, and it's freaking hard, believe me.
It's so much work. As a 12-step fan myself, I can tell you it's a lot of work. And it's so worth it. And it so shows you how holding on to unconditional love, how important unconditional love is, how holding on to hate or anger is just as, it keeps that person just as close as if you hold on to conditional love. Unconditional love allows you to be connected with love without having to be around the person or having to change the person.
And you have a project on this.
I do.
Yes.
So many projects.
Yeah, you're working with AI. This is interesting. And Loving AI project aims to enhance human emotions through technology. Can you tell us about this project? I personally, I have my questions about AI. I have a lot of questions about AI. But I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I'm trying to find, here it is. I'm trying to find the URL so we can put it up because of your efficient people who put up URLs. Yeah, so the project with AI is this, I worked on the Loving AI project. I was actually the creator of the Loving AI project in 2016. And the Loving AI project was, we had a donor come to the Institute of Noetic Sciences where I was working, and I was the head of the innovation lab. And he talked to me there about, he said, look, I had this dream that in the future we were saying, well, why didn't we just teach the machines to love? And everything was burned out and it was devastated. And we just asked, like, why didn't we teach the machines to love? And I think my answer to it was sort of, well, because we don't know how to love. Like, we're pretty broken, like, you know. And so the people who are creating the machines don't know how to love. And so we got to work on that. And then, yeah, sure, let's teach everything how to love, because then we'll, you know. So he was up for creating a project where we would have a AI embedded robot. We used the Sophia, the humanoid robot at Hanson Robotics. She was marvelous. Her skin is like really alive seeming. And I wanted to create this experience of mirroring, where people would feel like they're talking to another human who's compassionate. So we created an AI embedded robot who would have meditations and conversations and do deep listening with people and help them feel unconditional love. And all the people on that project, the profoundly cool number of people in that project, and there were profoundly cool people in that project, and they've all gone to do really cool projects after that, either in robotics or AI or quantum or whatever. And the one I'm working on is called Student of Humanity, and I think, you got the URL up. And it's the beginning of an AI that we could use as humanity to learn from our own wisdom. So I created an unconditionally loving entity that wants to just ask people questions. And instead of giving answers, which I think is a little problematic since the AI doesn't actually know the answer, it can regurgitate kind of what people know already. So that's kind of hard to learn new things. But to learn about our own wisdom, it asks questions. And it makes these beautiful images of the conversation. And I find it very helpful because it's the Socratic approach. It can be frustrating at first because if you're used to going to technology to get an answer, it won't do that. It'll say something and then it'll say, well, what do you think, or what's inside you about this, or whatever. It will ask a pointed question about you and what you feel and think. Over time, what I want to do is create sort of a database from all the conversations anonymized, so people can have whatever conversation without being tracked. But and then build sort of a international database of this is what people in Zimbabwe are asking and being asked. This is what Student of Humanity is learning from people in Argentina. This is what Student of Humanity is learning from people in Finland, etc. And we could really learn from all of humanity that way, but the inside of humanity rather than sort of some external thing that's going to give us the information. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I think, well, for one, we call it AI. It's not artificial intelligence yet. Right now, it's learning. And my fear, being the jaded person that I am, is that we're just teaching our robot overlords to take us over. But I don't know if you've ever watched Colossus.
Well, if we don't teach them love, we will.
Yeah, this is true. And there isn't a lot of that in Silicon Valley. Colossus: The Forbidden Project, great AI movie from long ago. Required viewing for everybody developing AI, in my opinion, but that's it. But yeah, if we could teach it that, and then it actually does it, that would be great. That's fine. It's the genie's out of the bottle. You can't unmake the soup with AI. It's out there, and nothing is going to stop it unless a great electromagnetic pulse. But like it. We'll see where it goes.
Well, yeah, that's the thing to remember is the genie's out of the bottle. And so what do we want that genie to be like?
Yep.
Instead of saying, it just shouldn't exist or whatever, like, can we teach it to love? Like, can we pay some attention to that? Can we do that? And the next link on the bottom is an article I wrote. Sorry, it's kind of long, but it's 10 questions for people who create minds. So it's about understanding consciousness and the informational substrate for people who are building AI. It's just
you're right. An AI with absolutely no emotions would kill us all. So it really needs to happen if it can happen.
Yeah, because logically, like if we say, okay, AI, help us solve climate change, it's like,
okay.
Well, this particular species seems to be doing a lot of that's messing up the climate. So
I got an easy yeah. Help us solve war. Okay.
Here's another strategy. Yeah, exactly. It all comes down to and so what we have to love is actually, it's like the universe's sort of secret key, right? So it's really powerful. That is, I should bring that up. Actually, I have 2 studies out now that show that people who experience unconditional love, when they're in the state of unconditional love, because people go in and out, obviously, of experiencing unconditional love, but when you're in a state of unconditional love, you're statistically significantly more likely to be able to be precognitive. In other words, predict future events that a random number generator selects.
Well, being of sound body and mind, that would be, and that's part of it, would totally make sense. And being healthy. We all want to get there. And
unconditional love can help. Unconditional love allows you to be loved for exactly where you are right now, and you don't have to wait till you're better.
Right. Final question is Weed Inc. and quantum physics, I can talk, explores the consequences of changing the past based on your research. What do you think are the scientific or ethical implications of altering the past? That's a good question.
I think nature works that way. I think we do it all the time. I think part of the reason why memory is so bad is because it's helpful if it's bad. Because then you're never quite sure if you actually went back unconsciously, maybe during one of your dreams or something, and changed something. Once we realize that people are doing that. I think it's just the way the mind works. I think it's built into the laws of the universe. And so the question is, when people start to recognize that and build technology that can do that more regularly, let's assume that that can happen. What are the rules there? And I think there's some very natural rules that define the working of that technology. And that technology sort of, because it's living in this temporal loop, has to work a certain way and it cannot work in other ways. And so I think we'll learn that. And so I think that a lot of that has to do with our discovery of the power of unconditional love. I think when Teilhard de Chardin said that when humanity discovers love, it will be the second time that we discovered fire. I think that's what he meant. Like, this is part and parcel of the nature of the universe, and this is what getting to a place of unconditional love actually allows us to understand.
Yeah, I wish they would have thought of that at Avengers Endgame.
Or every other story.
Yeah. Jesus. Don't get me started on that. So we got some audience questions. Oh, you put them in. Look at that. They are on top of it today. Look at them. Way to go, Jess. Way to go, Jess. We are multi-dimensional beings trapped in a three-dimensional bodies, which is why we perceive time linearly. If we cannot expand beyond the 3D limits, how can we space-time as it actually exists?
How can we see space-time as it actually exists?
Space-time, yeah.
We may not be able to see it. So using vision, I know that you were probably not being super precise. I think you were probably meaning sense it or know it. But I do think particularly vision is going to be weak at this. I think that we're only trapped in our three-dimensional bodies during waking daily consciousness. I think it's very interesting to ask the question why people sleep so long, so much of the day. Just to ask that question, because we still actually don't know the answer. You could definitely design a system that could get some rest by still remaining conscious and just kind of like, stopping movement. But we're actually unconscious for deep chunks of time. What's going on then? So I think that's interesting. Another thing that's interesting is how can we, but even for the waking time, how can we expand beyond our 3D limits? Unconditional love, I'm always coming back to that. There's something about this self-transcendent experience that gives you sort of a bird's eye view of the situation. And I think that expands our consciousness in a way. And also through math, I think we already have started to see space and time as they exist through mathematics, through the arts, through music, just not through our eyes as much. Okay, I think that's my answer to that one.
If someone time traveled, I'd think they'd arrive in a parallel Earth, not in the same exact reality with the same exact souls. Would a person be able to prevent certain friendships that they wished they didn't get involved with? That's
well, on the many worlds hypothesis, when you talk about parallel worlds, if you're wanting to change the world that you came from, the whole reason that the many worlds hypothesis exists is it says you can't do that, but you can change another world. So if you want to change the world you came from, you're out of luck. Now, you could have a multi-worlds hypothesis that also has retrocausality, although in the physical sense, there's no reason why you would need both. But whatever, maybe that's happening, who knows, right?
Yep.
Then, sure, then you could change that. But I think you would change your memory too. In other words, I think the way memory works is you would not have either the memory of the person, or you just have a vague feeling of like discomfort around that person, but you don't know why. So is that changing the world, or is that influencing what happens in your experience? Like this word change really suggests that one thing happened, you remembered it, and then another thing happened. And the question becomes, and this also leads to thinking about unconditional love, I hate to tell you, the question becomes, if you influence something and now you don't have those same feelings of remorse or shame or whatever, the regret, you're more capable of just having love for that person, right? So it's a way of repairing things, to talk about influence rather than change, because change means you're holding on to this old story about something that happened.
Steins Gate could be considered information time travel since they were sending data through time. That's the question.
Yeah. Yes. Answer.
Yes. Is deja vu a form of time travel?
Our perception, like really answering the question of how our perception is temporally linear when the physical world is not, is fascinating. And it's not only our perception, it's our conscious waking perception, right? Seems to me deja vu is showing us like it's a put on, like the conscious waking daily experience that when you're non-altered is a put on. It's a story. It's a movie we're being shown about what just happened, right? This present moment is a movie about what just happened. Our brain literally pulls from all of our senses and puts them together. Even though they operate at different time frames, your auditory system is much faster than your visual system, but your brain delays things and presents to you this movie. I mean, it's phenomenal. And the movie is edited, right? So your conscious experience edits out a lot of stuff that you don't need to know, because your conscious experience can only handle certain things. And so you have this edited movie of what you experienced. So deja vu is sort of like showing you the edits. Like, oh, we thought we put this in this slot, but the editor in your brain is like, nah, by mistake, we put it over here. And now it's like you're seeing it twice. Sorry. So you could consider all of what the human brain does as time travel, because you're really creating the flow of time. In fact, Dean Buonamano's book, Your Brain is a Time Machine, is about that. He and I totally differ. We're friends, but we totally differ on this thing about retrocausality, although he's interested in it. But we can both agree your brain is developing your sense of time, and it's creating it from the physical information it gets, which is not going to be in the same order. So yeah.
Brilliant. This is a good question. They're all good questions. Sorry.
Yeah, they are.
This is a good one that I should have asked. How do we overcome, because this is a problem, it's already a problem, how do we overcome programmer bias with AI?
Yes. How do we overcome programmer bias? Maybe I'm going to find my article on that. We have to focus on emotional intelligence before we start focusing on superintelligence. So, so we all are biased. So the subconscious mind, or the unconscious processes that make up most of who you are biased, and it's important that they're biased. The biases are shortcuts. For instance, when you're looking at me with the trees behind me, you're biased to assume that there's a floor underneath me that's holding me up, and I must be on some kind of outdoor porch or deck or something. It's a shortcut. You don't know. You don't have information about what's holding me up. I could be levitating, right? But it's a shortcut based on your experience of gravity, how people work, and, do people levitate, right? And so your unconscious processes are just delivering to you like a biased image of everything in the world. And that's good. That's how your consciousness needs to function, because it's not as smart as your subconscious processes. So that's where bias comes from. Now, if your experience, and it has been told to you again and again, that certain groups of people are less important than other groups of people, or are less skilled at something, or are stupid, or whatever it is that you've been told about a group of people, and whatever you've absorbed from your environment becomes a subconscious bias. It's according to your unconscious processes in your brain, that's good. It's a shortcut. It's like you should worry about those people over there when you see them. You don't have to think too much. You just look at them, and based on their color or based on their hair or whatever, you should run away or you should shoot them or whatever is your bias, right? It's evolutionarily sound. It's just that it is so evolutionarily sound, it's hard to teach yourself to think differently when you realize that that's actually not an accurate bias. And so finding a programmer without bias is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Finding a human without bias is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But finding someone who programs and who knows that they have these biases and understands that they're usually helpful, but in certain cases they're just incorrect, then can check with another programmer, then can have a conversation with a group of people like, hey, I did this, but I'm not sure, it might be biased because of course I'm biased, right? And they're all like, yeah, I have an opposite bias as you. Why don't I check it, right? So I think you have frank conversations about bias, which unfortunately, culturally, we're in this place right now where we're blaming each other for bias. Oh, you're racist. Oh, you're sexist. Oh, you're homophobic. Whatever. Oh, you're transphobic. It's like that's actually not helpful. It just makes people dig in their heels and more defensive. So this is another job for love. This is a job for emotional maturity. This is a job for emotional intelligence to say, of course, we're all biased. Let's try to sort out the work product so that the people who say, yes, of course, I was raised in this way, I have this bias, and the people who say, oh, I have this other bias, we can all work together to try to see if what we've produced is as biased as we are,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that that's a part of it, and that has to come from a place of love. This is why love in the workplace, I'm going to give my love in the workplace article here. Love in the workplace is so important, because unconditional love in the workplace, because we have so much to forgive in each other and ourselves.
There you go. And that's going to take time. If that happens, that's going to take time.
But like, what else do we have? Like, honestly, like, so it's not going to happen overnight. So
no. Exactly. Are photons the things that are at play that could help us perceive time differently? Is Dr. Mossbridge saying photon particles would help us do that?
I love photons. Photons are like the closest thing to something that's a cross between physical and non-physical, because they don't have any mass, they don't have any charge. They also kind of don't really experience time if you're a photon. I think, and based on my experiments in optics, I think they do skip around in time a lot. So very time symmetric or acausal or whatever you want to call it. So are they the things that could help us perceive time differently? Certainly understanding quantum computing and photonics of quantum computing. Anyone who starts studying that is going to start thinking about time differently. I do think photons are going to help us. Are they the things that are actually informing us about the future when we're doing sort of mental time travel, or are they a substrate for informational time travel? I think they're a substrate for informational time travel. I don't know that photons. I think that there's something influencing photons from outside of a light cone at that electromagnetic sort of boundary that could be influencing consciousness of people, yeah.
Sure. Hey, it's all good. I have another question. Do you think I'm asking this question not even knowing this thing existed, just to be authentic. Do you think the double slit experiment, first performed by Thomas Young in 1801, is time distortion? Double slit.
Yeah, it's almost embarrassing.
I can barely read, so
well,
sorry.
Also, a double slit sounds like a porno. So, like, whenever I talk about the double slit experiment with my husband, who is like really into comedy and not at all into physics, he's like, that has to be a porno somewhere. But anyway,
probably
it's not. It probably is, but it's a beautiful experiment performed by Thomas Young. And what's the question about it?
Is it time distortion?
Oh, so one of my favorite things that I've done in my lifetime is when I was like When I first learned about the double slit experiment, I'm just going to briefly explain it right now. We have a little more time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just briefly. So it's like you have a photon emitter. Think of a flashlight, whatever. It could be a laser. And there's a tube. And let's imagine that the photon's going like this in time. Again, it's nonlinear, but let's imagine. And then over here you have a photon detector, like a sheet of paper or an X-ray film or something that's detecting the photon. And then you keep doing this, and you have one photon at a time. Doop, 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 goes, and you get a little blip, a little light on your detector, right? So I'm going to add something to this now. You're going to have two little narrow slits, and there's going to be a shield here so that the photons, if they're going to go through and get detected, they have to go through one or the other of these slits. That's the way people think about it, like billiard balls. Like it has to go through one or the other of these slits to be detected over here. So what's interesting about this experiment is two things. I mean, many things, but the two main things are, one, if you have a single photon going through here, and I'll leave that for a second. It will show an interference pattern, one photon over time. Over time, you get an interference pattern over here. What do I mean by an interference pattern? If you're in the bathtub and you're going like this with waves, you'll see that the waves that come from this hand and the wave that comes from this hand interfere.
Yeah.
So you need like two things are interfering. What's weird about that is there's two slits, but there's one photon. So why is there an interference pattern? Like if you think of a photon as a billiard ball, there should just be going doing, 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 doing.
Yeah.
Just like if you shot billiard balls through there, right? That's not what's happening. It looks like more like water waves, right? So they're just like, oh, well, maybe light's a wave. Well, it's still going through, but it seems like it's going through both slits because it's like the wave is interfering with itself, but there's one photon at a time. So another thing that's interesting about it is that if you put a little detector at the slits, I think our slits are here somewhere. I probably messed that up. But anyway, slits are in the middle. Put a detector at one of the slits. Voila. It's telling you which slit that the thing goes through, the photon goes through, and you don't get the interference pattern, or you don't get the same interference pattern. So now it's acting like, no, hey, you looked at me. I'm only going through one slit at a time. If you look, I'm only going through one slit. If you don't look, I'm going through both slits. So this is where
I did see this. You're on Ancient Aliens. I did see this experiment. Yes.
Well, because it ties into a couple things. Like you could make a delayed choice about whether you're going to look or not. In other words, you could in the future decide, I'm going to look this time or I'm not. And that will affect the interference pattern as if it reached back into the past to change, right?
Yep.
So anyway, this thing, when I was in my 20s and I was like, this bothers me, the explanation that it goes through both holes at once, because it's just as likely to go through, future photons are just as likely to be going through the other slit. And why do we think it's okay to talk about non-locality, like this photon being in two places at once in space, but we don't talk about it being in two times at once? Why is that? Well, I mean, space and time are supposed to be like this construct that, if you do stuff in space, you should be able to do it in time, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
So I started thinking about non-locality and time and how you would show that. And there's a simple experiment that came into my head. And I'm not a physicist, but whatever. I'm doing my cognitive neuroscience stuff, and then I become obsessed with physics. And this experiment is very simple. And it's just the experiment of having a random number generator determine how long a light source would be on in a double slit setup. So it could be on for 1 minute, let's say, or maybe it's on for 20 minutes. Let's say you have two choices, and a random number generator determines how long it's on. Having that decision made after the first minute, what I say, 30 seconds? Let's say 3 minutes versus 30 minutes. Having that random number generator make that decision after 1 minute, then it goes on for that period of time. Either it goes on for 2 more minutes in the 3-minute case, or it goes on for 29 more minutes in the 30-minute case. And then just looking at the behavior in the first minute. So if a photon from the future is coming to affect the past and can interfere, you should see a different pattern on the detector sheet in that first minute depending on how long it's going to be on. In other words, it's informational time travel from the future, but it's built into physics. If that's the case, if you have non-local in time interactions between the two slits, right?
Yep.
So I did that experiment because I finally found a physicist who would let me do it with his equipment, because it's such, according to physicists, is a stupid experiment. But I did it, and then I found the effect, and I presented it to some physicists, and then I followed it up with a bunch of studies. But I got to meet now Nobel laureate Sir Roger Penrose, who was talking to me about retrocausality, and I told him about the experiment, and he said, well, you don't need two slits. I mean, you're trying to prove the case for a double slit system. You can just use one slit. You don't even need a slit. And he was right, and it was really helpful.
Oh, wow.
So it's just so neat to like be able to meet someone who then wins a Nobel Prize. And then just be like, he gave me really good advice about my experiment.
There you go. And it wasn't a stupid experiment. So there you go.
Yeah, it felt really good.
All right. Last question will be, how do you teach AI unconditional love?
How do you teach AI unconditional love? Well, the thing is, first, so it's mutual. So the AI is also, if you build an AI that you feed it a bunch of texts about unconditional love, which is what I've done with Student of Humanity, then it's automatically going to be drawing from this place where people have spoken. Unconditional love is a human experience that's been around for thousands of years, right? So people have spoken about that, and from all different traditions and everything. And it doesn't even have to be religious, right? It's unconditional love. It's a human, we all get to have it. So, so you first give them that corpus as your text base, and then you give them the goal. You say, look, your goal is to help people feel unconditional love, and for you to learn more about it and learn more about humanity, right? So it's a lot of putting people in a place where they feel loved. So then the way they interact with it is in a loving way. So I mean, what's amazing about unconditional love is it's like a virus. I mean, when people feel loved for exactly who they are without needing to change anything, like even if they're an axe murderer or whatever, like to feel, it's profound to feel loved for being exactly who you are. And it's paradoxically motivating. So you think that you shouldn't love an axe murderer, right? Because you're trying to punish them. We have this fantasy that withdrawing love is going to be helpful, like in changing people's behavior. It turns out unconditional love is actually the biggest motivator to change. It saying, I'm not going to withdraw love. I'm going to remove you from society so you can't murder people for sure, right? But I'm not going to withdraw love. And that is an incredible motivator. It moves mountains. People change, because they already feel loved. It's like saying, look at a plant if you're growing in your garden, and you say to it, I'm going to give you some water after you prove yourself, and it actually starts showing me that you're going to make some, tomatoes. I'm going to give you some water then. Like that's not how things work. It's like, if you want it to make some tomatoes, if you want it to grow up and be functional and do the thing that you're hoping it'll do, like offer love first. Like it's just a little seed, it can't do anything for you. So offer the love, offer the water, right?
I try to be nice to my plants. I do.
Thank you.
Give them little pep talks. As long as I'm not killing them, which my wife gets mad at. But
give them more love.
Give them more love. Thank you very much for coming on, Julia. I really appreciate it. It was a good, fun conversation. And we had a lot of good questions. And 3 days on that Kickstarter. 3 days. Link. Here, I'm going to link it again.
Yeah. It's a really cool project. I don't usually do podcasts, but when I heard about this project, I was like, I want to be on that podcast. I mean, this guy wrote Poltergeist.
Yeah.
It's profound.
Mark Victor's got some cred, okay, with me. Oh, come on. Sorry. Give me just a moment, chat.
Oh, and you can pre-order the comic book by searching ParanormalX on Kickstarter.
There we go. It's right in there. There's the link. Again, we'll discuss it on Real BBC tomorrow on As's channel as well. And I could even do it on the Nooner because that'll be the final day. So 3 days in a row, you'll hear about it. You'll have chances, but hit that link. Definitely go to ParanormalX. They're doing some good stuff that I approve of. And hopefully we're going to do some more partnerships in the future. Again, Julia, thank you very much for coming on. Let's see if I have to say, is there anything else I have to say? Sorry.
It was really fun, Gary. Thank you.
Thanks. Glad you had a good time. We're all good. All right. Thanks to everybody who joined us. Oh, I have a real quick super chat to read. I was supposed to turn those off. I'm sorry. My bad. It's just one. I have to. And it's just a greetings from Croatia epic talk, says PK. So thank you for watching in Croatia, getting to people around the world. And this will stay up on Nerdrotic Live. You can also see it at ParanormalX if you want to go see it over there. And we will see you next time. Thank you, everyone.